It's my pleasure to introduce our first speaker of the morning. He's a conservative and he's speaking on capitalism, a great friend of our conservative movement. Daub is a native of Omaha. He's a graduate of Benson High School. He was a captain in the U.S. Army Infantry. He was a platoon leader and company commander in Korea. He was a four-term member of the U.S. House of Representatives from 1981 to 1989. He was also the mayor of Omaha for 6.5 years. He's currently a member of the UNO Advisory Board. He is married to his wife Mary Wordman, and he has 3 grown children. Please help me give Daub a warm conservative welcome.
I like that. Nice, short, sweet introduction. Just perfect. Didn't bore anybody, I hope. I really appreciate that introduction. Good morning, everyone. How are you today? It's Saturday morning. It's a little bit of moisture out there, which we need, and it's a warm day, and it's got to be a fun day for me to be with you. I hope it'll be a fun day for you. You've got quite a program, and I'm just happy to be here. You know, I thought maybe if you'd done a little bit more research on my record, you would have found out all those ratings. You know, the rating game that gets played, you know, all the votes that you cast, and when you have the privilege that the 2nd District of Nebraska gave me to serve in the Congress, I probably voted on thousands of different pieces of legislation over that 8-year period of time, and my conservative voting record was probably about 99.9. I probably strayed once or twice from the fold, but the reason is that it's not a matter of being conservative, it's a matter of what the first principles are. And it's a matter of what the Constitution says. And so if you're prepared to hold public office, and I mean whether it's school board or presidency of the United States, being prepared to hold a particular public office means we should expect our candidates to have done their homework, to have educated themselves and or take instruction from us on what we think their orientations ought to be on the moral issues of the day, because those are the issues that underpin the determination of the lawmaking process. How many times do you have to look at the Constitution or even go to the Supreme Court of the United States to see the word God, and or how we were founded, how the framing founders looked at the spiritual that underpin the morality of the choices they felt we should have to make as people, whether it be in our states or collectively as a nation. So I want to talk for a few minutes. I was told I only had, Jim when he called me told me I only had 5 minutes. So I was driving over here today thinking, yeah, I've got this all outlined and I got to say an awful lot in 5 minutes. Now, you know, for me that's really short. So I'm going to take about 12 minutes here to talk about capitalism and free enterprise. And then I want to talk, but I want to preface that with some first principles. And then I want to talk about my 2 favorite candidates for public office. And then leave about 15 minutes for questions and answers. If you go back and look at the constitutional process in the framing of it, there were 2 distinct philosophies built into the debate. Now, we didn't call them Republicans and Democrats then, or conservatives and liberals then. They were Whigs, Tories, Federalists, Populists. There were all sorts of different names. But the 2 philosophies that got installed in the Constitution and refined in the first 10 amendments in the Bill of Rights dealt with some pretty realistic things. How did the country's population get here? Well, it fled, right? From tyranny and persecution to a place that was free. It wasn't organized then, but it was free. And then as they began to organize, we saw 13 colonies form on the eastern seaboard. And when they got together to form that more perfect union, they said those things which are not enumerated in the charter, that's the Constitution, we'll refine in the bylaws, the first 10 amendments, the first one, of course, the most important one, great Democrat, Jefferson, freedoms of speech, assembly, press, and religion. But down in number 9 and number 10 is the real root of why we have preserved our democracy. It said those things not enumerated, not specified in the charter shall be reserved to whom? The states and or to the people. Very important piece of that document. Now the Constitution has survived 230 years. We have the longest, oldest, continuous form of a government in recorded history, unbroken. The Constitution has been amended how many times?
27.
27. Because Jefferson said, wouldn't it be terrible if the coat we wore as a boy befit us when we were a man? Pretty simple, right? We're going to grow up, we're going to get bigger, things are going to change a little bit. We can't wear the coat we wore when we were 3 or 4 years old. We're going to get to be 20 and be a little bigger, and that coat's going to have to, it's not going to fit. So given good reason, we've amended our charter, our Constitution, not very many times actually, 27, given good reason. Guess who did that? Not the president, not the Congress, not the states, the people. Very important concept. So that's the first premise I want to ask you to remember. You all know it, but just to reiterate it, that's the foundation. Inside of all that is a lot of philosophy, a lot of morality that help make all those judgments. Now, Republican, Democrat. Well, have you ever seen a bigger difference between the two parties in your lifetimes than this very year? And that's not just in Washington. That's right here in Lincoln, Nebraska, in our capital. In terms of the issues. And in terms of the differences between the two parties. Teachers in high school indicate to us of our youngsters that there's no difference between the two parties. Well, yes, there is. There's a big difference. There's a philosophical difference. It's the same difference with the Whigs and the Tories and the Populists and the Federalists. We said there's 13 of us, and we're going to cede some power to a central system, but very limited, and we're going to keep the rest of it in the states. And what goes on in New Hampshire or Vermont is not necessarily what should go on in Virginia or in Florida. So it was within that same framework that it's all evolved to the same basic principles. Now the Republicans and the Democrats have that limited government versus central government, pay-as-you-go, deficit spend, general approach that the federal system can pass an Obamacare and reach beyond the intention of the Commerce Clause, like clean air and clean water, which don't stop and start with state boundaries, right? We can understand that in the sense of federalism. But you can't understand why somebody is going to tell me which insurance company I have to buy my insurance from and from whom I have to buy it. And if I don't, I'm going to get fined. The central system. Now, the state might be different. It can tell you that you can't drive a car if you don't have a driver's license. But Washington didn't tell us that. It's that very clear distinction in my mind that needs to be made clear in a lot of Americans' minds today that there were reasons why we built the engine of America the way we did. Now, there's another piece to that. Freedom of choice. It has to do with the economy. It has to do with the dollar. Now, my father used to say, wink like Ronald Reagan, and he'd kick his head to the right and smile, and he'd wink, and he'd say, you know, money's not the most important thing in life. And then he said, it's well ahead of what's in third place. And what he's saying to me as a youngster was that, you know, it does glue, bed, and board together, right? That economic system, it could be stones or dollars, whatever it is, but it's a barter and trade system. It's a way we account for the things we need, the things we want, the things we make, the things that are bought and sold in commerce. No country in the world has freer commerce. Now, we're beginning to wonder, I think, if we're conservatives, just how much more freedom can be taken away from us by a central system that's out of control. And there might be just as many Republicans responsible for that as Democrats, so we have to be objective about that. One of the reasons why Tea Party patriots exist is to remind Americans what those first principles are. So I can give you a lot of examples at the federal central system level, at the state level, even at the local level. Immigration would be a good example. But the fact of the matter is, the first principles are very important. Free enterprise is very simple to explain. No job, no pay. No pay, no job. No job, no pay, no profit. There's no charity without profit. If you're a conservative, you understand the free economy has a very simple word that propels it: competition. When it is regulated but not fettered with a burden of unreasonable costs or requirements to comply, if you will, then that competition produces lower price and better quality. That's always been true, and it's provable. So if we believe in our republic and in liberty, we believe in choice, we believe in this idea of limited government, then we understand why commerce in the free enterprise system, as we've described it, works in America. I would ask you to be tolerant of the idea that in some countries it might not work as well because they weren't born the way we were. And so there are other forms of government that we can respect and we can appreciate. And they may not be just like ours, and that's probably one of the big difficulties with conservatives, may I admonish. Sometimes we think ours is the only way. Sometimes we take the point of view that the other folks are wrong. And then we set up a contention that we really shouldn't do, because that tends to debilitate the views others have of what we stand for. Are you kind of following me? There's a degree of tolerance that's required, and that degree of compassion is required. That's why conservatives are much more able to defend their point of view. So I want you to think about free enterprise and capitalism through a different lens than maybe you've thought about it. It's there because we did not burden it by banning it, or by taxing it, or by regulating it to a point where someone else didn't want to do what you do to compete with you to do better than you do. Not in a negative sense, right? But in a very constructive, positive sense. It is a philosophical and moral underpinning about our first principles. Free enterprise and capitalism go hand in hand. To me, they're one and the same. You can't have one without the other. The difference? Unfettered, unburdened government. And so while ours seems to be foundering right now and suffocating under a philosophy of more central management of our government, from cap and trade to healthcare to you name it, that is a philosophy of government that I believe this year is going to be rejected by the American people, not only in the federal election, but in state and local elections all across the country. So how do we protect it? Well, we protect it by being active, civically, not just politically, but being involved in lots of organizational activity, from our church to our neighborhoods to organizational activity around our workplace. Somebody said to me once, well, it's a woman's right to choose, so the government has no business being involved in the issue of abortion. And I said, the last time I looked, the Supreme Court in our tripartite form of government is a part of our government, and they're involved. And so it's very logical that politically we get involved, because the last time I looked, government made that decision, didn't it? It was the Supreme Court, but it's a part of our government. How can someone say that government should not be in that issue when the Supreme Court got into the issue? So we can defend our point of view from a constitutional perspective. And if that issue is ever to be addressed, it should only be at the state level.